For this tutorial today, what you're going to need is a pair of scissors, a large-eyed tapestry needle, and two double point needles that are about the same size as the work that you are knitting with. Today I'm going to show you how to do a sewn tubular bind off when you're working in 2x2 rib. So if you take a look here, I have knit 2, purl 2 in the round on my work, and when I cast it on with this project, I did a tubular cast on in the round, which starts out in a 1x1 rib, and then I converted it to a 2x2. So now what I want to do is bind off my work using that same tubular bind off so it matches my cast on. But in order to do that, it's easier to convert these 2x2 stitches back to the 1x1, just like we had when we cast on our work. So what we'll want to do, now that we've knitted in our work and we're ready to cast off or bind off, what we have to do is convert these 2x2 rib stitches to 1x1. So load up my front needle here, empty my back needle, and we are working in the round here. So we're just going to knit our next round, but we're going to switch it to 1x1 rib. So our first stitch is knit. We're going to knit that. Now our next stitch is a knit stitch. We want it to be a purl for 1x1 rib. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle, turn my work so you can see better, and we're going to go in purlwise into the second stitch. That's our purl stitch. We're going to secure that on our right hand needle. Now we're going to grab this knit stitch, and I just like to pinch it and then pull that purl stitch off of our left hand needle and pick up the knit stitch that we were holding. And then you twist your work, pop the purl stitch back onto your left hand needle, and as you can see, we have manipulated those stitches or twisted them so that our knit stitch that was previously on the right side is now on the left side, and now our purl stitch is ready to be knitted or worked. So we have purl and then knit, and then we have a purl next. So we're still following our knit 1 purl 1 rhythm. After our purl is another knit, but then as you can see, our knit 1 purl 1 rib is got a hiccup again. So we started with knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. We need a purl, but we have a knit. So we're going to again go in through that second stitch, which is a purl stitch, grab our knit stitch here and pick it back up. So it might take a little finagling here, but once you've done it a couple times, it's pretty easy. If you want, you could always use the stitch marker to secure that knit stitch. I'll show you here again. Purl, knit. Okay, we're up to a knit stitch again, but we want the purl. So you could go into that purl stitch purlwise. You could place this knit stitch, secure it on either a cable needle or a DPN. But as you can see, that's kind of cumbersome to have that hanging out here in the front. That's why I like to just grab it. But that is something that you could do. So we go ahead and pick up that knit stitch, twist it, put the purl stitch on the end of our left stitch, and now we're ready to do a purl. So you'll continue to do this all the way around your work, working your 1x1 rib. Now we're ready to turn and do our other half of our stitches. Now again, we finished off with a purl. So now we have to do a knit stitch. And now again, we've got a knit when we want a purl. So we're gonna, again, grab that purl stitch, secure the knit one, pop the purl off, pick up the knit, and then pop the purl stitch back onto our left hand needle. Now we're ready for a purl stitch, knit, purl, knit. And I'll just go ahead and finish the rest of this row quickly so I can show you our next step. That's purl, knit, purl, knit, and then twist these last 2 stitches. Purl, knit, and then of course we'll finish off with a purl. So now we have a complete round of knit one, purl one rib. And normally this would not look good in your work, of course. You've got this knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and all of a sudden it's converted into 1 by 1 rib. But it's only one row, so it's not going to be noticeable. But I'll show you how we're going to finish this bind off. So you're going to want to first take your working yarn, and you're going to want to trim it so that we can weave it onto our tapestry needle. I've actually already cut my tail, but typically what you'll want to do is wrap your tail around your work 3 or 4 times. So as you can see, I've given myself plenty of room. I think I wrapped it 4 or 5 times, but then you'll cut your tail, you'll unwrap it, and now we're ready to do that sewn bind off. So we're going to weave our tail through our tapestry needle, and I like to give myself plenty of room here so that we're not working with a super long tail that's going to get in the way. Okay, so that's ready. Now this is our first stitch that we're ready to bind off, so that's the one we're going to work with. Now if you're using circulars like I am when you're knitting in the round, I'm actually knitting magic loop, so I would just pull this back needle off so it doesn't get in my way. Now the first thing you'll want to do for the tubular sewn bind off is what's called a setup. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go in purlwise through our first stitch, and we're going to leave that on the needle. And I like to keep it as tight as possible. Cinch that tail up nice and tight when you're working in the round. Now we're going to go in through the back and between our first and second stitch on our needle. And after you go in between, you're going to kind of tilt your work here, and you're going to go in knitwise through the second stitch and leave that on the needle. So this is our setup. We went in purlwise through the first stitch and then came in from the back between the first and second stitches and then went in knitwise through that second stitch. And we've left both those stitches on the needle. Now we're ready for our little bind off all around the row. And there's kind of a mantra that you can say to yourself as you're doing this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in knitwise through the first stitch and slip that stitch off the needle. So that's knit and slip. Now we're going to go in purlwise through the second stitch, and we're going to leave that stitch on the needle. So that was knit, slip, then purl. Now we're going to go in purlwise through our first stitch, slip it off. So that's purl, slip. And then again, just as we did before, we'll go in between from the back, in between the first and second stitch, and then go in knitwise through that second stitch. So that was purl, slip, knit. So that is the end of our steps. It seems kind of confusing at first, but it'll become second nature to you after a while. So again, we'll start over that mantra: knit, slip, purl, and leave on. And then remember, purl, slip, come from behind, go in knitwise into the second stitch, and leave on. So again, we'll start over: knit, slip, purl, purl, slip, and knit. And you'll just continue this all the way around your work: knit, slip, purl, purl, slip, knit. And you can see after a while you can just pull our tail through here. You kind of get the hang of it: knit, slip, purl, purl, slip. Ooh, this one's going to be a little tighter. Knit. And now that we've reached our transition point here where we're halfway through our stitches, I like to just stop and pull my needle through, load up my stitches again. Okay, and again we just start with that knit stitch, so knit, slip, purl, purl, slip, knit. And if you're doing this mantra and something throws you off, like your kids come in the room and confuse you, or you got to get up and go do something, to know where you are in your work, you're always going to want a knit stitch first. You don't want to start off with a purl stitch. So we know we're ready to start that little mantra again. Knit, slip, purl, and then purl, slip, come in between, go in knitwise through the second. Knit, slip, purl, purl, slip. And this one I'm going to show you a different way of going in knitwise through the purl stitch. You can pull that needle through to the front and then go in knitwise through your purl stitch. That's another way to do it. It's just a lot quicker to do it the first way I showed you. Knit, slip, purl. I'll show you again here. Purl, slip, come in through the front and go in knitwise. That's just a quicker way to do it. We're almost to the end here, and I'll show you how we'll finish off our work. Knit, slip, purl, purl, slip, knit. Knit, slip, purl, purl, slip, knit. Here's our last stitch, and we've completed that little mantra. And these are the stitches we have left. Once you've ran out of stitches, as you can see, we don't have that third stitch like we did before that we want to go into purlwise. So what we'll do is we'll pretend that that purl stitch is on our needle when it's in fact over here. So to finish this off, we're going to slip this stitch off knitwise, knit, slip, and we don't have a stitch to go into purlwise, so we're going to go ahead and just go into that first knit stitch that we bound off. We'll go in purlwise, and now the next part of our mantra is to purl, slip. We'll drop our needle. Now we've run out of stitches, but if you remember in the second part of that mantra, it's to purl, slip, and then knit. So we came between the next two stitches on our needle. Since those are gone, what I like to do is I like to fold it into the inside of our work. And at this point, we can just weave our tail into the inside of our work because we are done. We've bound off all of our stitches, as you can see, in that 1x1 rib. And now that we're done, we just have to weave our tail in. And I do not like knots in my work at all. So what I like to do is just secure that tail that you finish off with, weave it in through your stitches, and I figure the more your finishing tail has to travel through your work, the more secure that tail is going to be. It's less likely to pop out on you after you've blocked your work. So I just weave that tail in, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it. All right, and now we can flip it to the right side. And as you can see, you can barely notice where we bound off our work. It pretty much mimics the cast on of our work, because we remember in your tubular cast on, you always cast on and work a couple rows of 1x1 rib, and then you convert to 2x2. So we've done that same thing in our bind off. We've just went back to that 1x1 rib and then did our sewn bind off. And this will give you a really great stretchy piece of work, unlike a long tail cast on and a traditional bind off. But that is how you do the 1x1 sewn bind off on 2x2 rib. I hope this helps you.